Business. It's how we get our start, how we make our way, how we pay our bills, and it's also how we get burned. Crazy bosses, backstabbing employees, theft, fraud, incompetence, and the fine print. So many unknowns in business. How will you guard against them? On the Mysteries of Business video podcast, we unravel tough cases to show you the danger lurking underneath. Will you learn the lessons from our panel of experts? Today, in our series Hacked, Cybercrime and Insecurity, we know tech companies can track what websites we visit, but your keyboard can give away a fortune when hackers steal every key you type. Are you headed for broke with every keystroke? Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of our series Hacked, Cybercrime and Insecurity. I'm Rob Emmett, along with our expert panel you see here. Today, we'll be talking about how human error contributes to cybercrime and how you can train yourself and your staff to follow cyber protocols to protect yourselves. First, though, here's our panel. Vince Mazza is a CEO of Guard Street Partners, a cybersecurity firm that assists businesses in proactively protecting their data and other assets, and they also provide assistance in cybersecurity emergencies. Also, we have Mary Erlane, who's the owner of Peak Development Strategies, through which she coaches and consults with small business owners to develop a solid foundation and a healthy organizational culture and strategy. We also have Anna Maria Vitti Welch, who's the president of the Vitti Companies, and she is a business insurance broker who helps clients sort through the sometimes overwhelming options in insurance to cover their risks and to have peace of mind. And I'm Rob Emmett. I'm with Win-Win Productions. I'm the owner. I'm also the video director and editor who helps companies make a good impression using video. So, on our shows, we start out with a case that involves some issue in a small business setting that either has the potential to be a disaster or already has become a disaster. Then our panel of experts pulls from their different areas of expertise to analyze the case. And they point out what went wrong and what they would have done or how they would have helped do it differently to navigate that situation with that client. Now, today's case shows how working from home can lead to some painful mistakes as you unknowingly open the door to cyber criminals to steal private client information. Lots of people still working from home. So here is the case we're working with today. Working from home during the pandemic hadn't thrown Ed off too much. He and his partners at the law firm had quickly pivoted to work virtually, and they had set up all their staff with the ability to log in from home to the main server at the office. Everyone had a password and understood the importance of keeping client information confidential, especially when working from home. It was a different way of working, but Ed could access all the documents he needed and correspond with clients from home. His main problem was getting his 12-year-old son to stop leaving half-eaten sandwiches next to the computer, which Ed let him use to play games with his friends. Ed didn't want him to have his own computer in his room. Who knows what he'd get into online? So he'd have to share Dad's computer and learn to clean up his own messes if he wanted to play his games. As Ed types away at his computer, he doesn't realize that he will soon have to clean up some messes himself. Ed has some important clients. One man in particular is a very wealthy client, even a little bit famous. He is also a very private man, and a man who has divulged some very personal details about his private life in the course of working with Ed's firm. Those details are all safe behind attorney-client privilege, of course, but they are also saved on the server that Ed is accessing even now. Ed doesn't yet know that his son has been visiting some new gaming sites. His son likes to try out new games and clicks on a lot of links. Ed doesn't know that one of those links downloaded keylogging software to his computer. It's been recording all his keystrokes for several months. Hackers have already sold his passwords on the dark web several times, and an anonymous buyer has been reading the sensitive documents on the server at Ed's firm. Tomorrow, that client, who is very rich and very private, will receive an anonymous email containing some of his very sensitive personal information and letting him know that much more has escaped the protection of the firm's server. He will find out that for $3 million in Bitcoin, the anonymous thief will ensure no one will ever find out what else is in those documents. Ed's computer was compromised through his son's gaming sites, but Ed's client will soon be compromised by one of the oldest games of all, blackmail. What will that client do when it comes out that Ed's credentials were the ones that let the blackmailers into the firm's server? Attorney-client privilege will most certainly turn into attorney-client conflict. Vince, you said that this case terrified you. Why was that?
I still say that it's terrified me because that is so common, that story. And there were the consequences to the law firm, their clients, the ability for the law firm to survive this. I mean, it's unbelievable how negative the consequences are. And that's why it scares me. I mean, it's, you would think, oh, it's at home. It's my child. He can use my laptop, my, work computer. I'm not using it, Innocent things can lead to big disasters. And that's the scary part of this. And I think that just a few simple protocols could have prevented this massive disaster that is coming for the individual, the clients, and the law firm.
Mm-hmm. And how would a company normally discover they were the victim of this kind of crime?
Well, in this scenario, it sounds like the company didn't have any protocols, didn't have any technologies that they should have been using. And the way that you find out about these things is the client makes a phone call and says, I got this email, or I was contacted somehow through this third party, and they had all these photos and specific things that I gave to your law firm. That's how they find out. And then the next client makes the same phone call, and then the next one and the next one. And that's where the disaster happens.
Wow. So for all of you, if this were your client, if Ed were your client, I'm saying the law firm, his partners, and Ed, what's your first move when he calls you up and says and describes what has happened? Any of you, what's your first move?
I just say, do the right thing, Ed. At this point, you've got to let your clients know what's happened, and now do the damage control and start hardening the security of your business and try to help your clients in any way that they can be helped, including providing ID theft protection, insurance coverage, and so forth.
I will tell you that it is a law for a business to protect their clients' personal information. And that's why I always try to inform people and ask them to please we do give a quote for cyber almost every single time. And we let them know that each state also has their own requirements if their client's information has been breached. And I don't know if any of you out there that are listening have ever received a letter, but they also have to include credit monitoring. And sometimes that's for 2 years. So that's also an expense, and you can purchase that, and cyber insurance will pay for that. But again, up to the limit.
From my perspective, is this an isolated incident, or is this now something that perhaps is going on in other employees' homes? So, in essence, doing an investigation, throughout everyone's logins and computers. So, I think that's several services that Vince can provide. Additionally, I think it's a moment that the leaders in this law firm need to come together and have a conversation as to how is business done going forward. Because they were, I'm sure, down in the trenches doing great work for their clients. And that was what their focus was just getting the work in and getting the work out and addressing, whatever matters this law firm addressed. But they weren't paying attention to what really matters, and that is standing up to the attorney-client privilege. And I see potential layers that I would need to work through to understand where we took our eye off of security, because I'm pretty sure perhaps in the office that wasn't happening. But there was a failure in communication when the shutdown happened, regarding policies and procedures as it relates to the use of computer equipment. Maybe there needed to be a buy, of laptops, that were solely used for the firm, or, it's a pretty wide-reaching discussion we would be having, and then pulling in expertise, as needed, and putting some training right then and there going forward on ceasing of any of this sloppy use of company equipment. Yeah, equipment as well as sloppy procedures.
Mm-hmm.
And long term, how, practically speaking, how will this work out? I mean, how do they deal with the client? Is the client obviously shouldn't pay the extortion money, but how's this going to work out?
With the client, you've got to be acting on behalf of the client, because it was your organization that caused the issue. So if there's insurance coverage, hopefully you have it. You need to be using that to clean up things for your client, because if you don't, it will turn into a lawsuit against you. And you don't want that to happen.
And so, again, do not call an attorney first.
Right.
Call your insurance agent first, to see if you have coverage. Right.
And then seek your insurance agent's direction as to when, but also be prepared as to who you are going to call. This is a law firm. They're going to need another law firm to represent them, if indeed, especially when we're talking about a very private, very rich person that maybe has a celebrity status. I would probably bet the farm on the fact that there is going to be litigation down the road, but definitely seek Anna Maria's guidance as to what are the steps to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And Anna Maria, why don't you call a lawyer?
Well, you don't call a lawyer because then you might be breaching your contract. The insurance company liability provides you an attorney.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so if you start getting somebody else involved and then they say, oh, well, guess what? I can't, this is too messy. Let's turn it over to your insurance agent. They might, or your insurance company, they might have done something to, make it worse.
Okay.
So
they
that's in any contract.
Yeah.
For insurance.
They don't want outside attorneys screwing up their case that they've insured.
Right. They don't want them dabbling in it.
Okay. I see. Okay. Is the client just going to have to accept that this information is just going to come out? That they're not going to pay? No one is going to advise him to pay the extortion money, right?
Nobody advises paying an extortion. Nobody advises it. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to use another example for just a moment, and then I'll circle back to the wealthy client. But if it's a hospital and you need your network, your systems in order to maintain life, it's literally a life or death situation. You're going to pay that ransom if there's no other option, because you've got to keep people alive. Mm-hmm. If this data for this wealthy client is incredibly important to the wealthy client, it could destroy the person, career, and all sorts of things. That's going to be a decision that needs to be made, and he may end up paying the extortion money, depending on how severe it is. But nobody advises it, of course.
Okay, now, because in the scenario, the thought is, well, then a year or two from now, they'll just come back and try and extort more money. So what do you do in the meantime? There's
a high probability they could come back, and there's probably other options. And I'm not a public relations company, but at that point, it may be worthwhile to consult one, depending on the type of information. Maybe you get ahead of it, in the first, it just depends, what it is. If there is a way to get ahead of it, remove the knife from the killer here, but it just depends on the situation. We never advise paying it though.
Right.
Right. And it's probably wise for anyone that's listening right now to contact somebody in that PR space to have a crisis management program in place in the event of, a negative situation, so that the news crew isn't shoving the mic up under, someone's face as they exit the firm.
Right.
And now you're on the network news, and then that crisis communication plan gets dispersed and trained on throughout the entire organization, so that if that mic moment happens, you're not making things worse by saying the wrong things.
Anna Maria, isn't the PR side of things, isn't that typically covered?
Sometimes crisis management, yes, but it's very, very minimal usually.
Yeah.
It's like a throw-in.
What are different ways employees, either through technology or otherwise, leave companies open like this?
Well, he let somebody else use his work computer. There should be a policy against anybody else other than somebody within the company. And even then, select people in the company are able to use your devices. I mean, that is number one. The second thing is he didn't have a VPN. And when it came to the keylogging, a simple way to avoid that is through something called multi-factor authentication, where you set it up so you get a text with a code or use an authenticator or something like that. Those are simple things. If an employee was trained on that or required to follow those protocols, the company wouldn't have been left open in this case.
Yeah. And real quick, what's a VPN?
Thank you. A virtual private network. So it essentially, that's what it means. And what it is you have an IP address connected to your office or home. That's how you use the internet. Mm-hmm. That IP address is tied to you. With a virtual private network, using an anonymous IP address. So that way the attacker doesn't know who exactly is, the person is anonymous and the attacker doesn't know who they are as they're getting into the network.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Something I see often, and this may be just stepping outside this, but I think it's another vulnerability, is that once the Paneras and Starbucks reopened, and I may be taking my, law firm laptop in there and jumping on Panera's, Wi-Fi because it's free and easy and available. There's another instance that it doesn't even take a child to be playing video games or, downloading whatever. You're opening yourself up to the vulnerability right there. And it says, other people may be able to see, and people just casually agree, and you don't know who's sitting next to you, and you're inviting them into your system.
There are some exclusions also on cyber liability where if you don't have your laptop encrypted and somebody steals your computer, the laptop, there'll be no coverage. So be really careful. I'm sure, Vince, you would say, tell anybody that has a laptop to have it encrypted.
Yeah, have your passcodes, in all regards. Absolutely. Even important files should be passcode protected. Your storage should be encrypted too.
I have a question. In the haste of the shutdown of last year, how frequently or how often do you suspect that in the rush of just getting back online and doing business, how much of this was overlooked?
Well, if you think about moving home, it all happened in 2 or 3 days. Mm-hmm. And we were expected to advance technology 10 years in 2 or 3 days to be able to encrypt properly and companies to have the right protocols. There was a 400% increase in cyber crimes last year. That's massive. And it was because people moved home to work and none of this was set up. The technologies weren't in place. The protocols weren't in place.
And the policies to mitigate the risk weren't in place.
Or if they were used, and the insurance companies paid through the nose last year. And that's why rates are going up if you're not careful this year.
Something that is less to do with a computer, and is oddly, there is an attorney I know who doesn't like email. He likes to have phone conversations. He's not one
old school.
He's old school, but he absolutely mitigated risk.
Sure.
By, if that had been his client, all that information would have been up here and not in the cloud or in a system. And that's how he mitigated a huge amount of risk, is being a bit old school. And that did come in handy. And it might be wise to, even email is cheap, it's easy, it's fast. But oh my goodness, it really can open up a threat. So do some of these conversations and this information belong on a system in the first place? And that's a great question to ask to mitigate risk right up front.
And so what types of things should clients be trained on, if you had a short list?
Sure. So a law firm is what we call in our industry the island hopping type of organization. So you crack in through some mode into the organization, and you've got the most important data of a bunch of clients right there. So the training needs to include proper password security. I mentioned multi-factor authentication a minute ago. So you've got a password and another step and maybe another step along the way, because emails are 95% of the cause of cyber attacks. Employees should be trained on how to spot phishing emails to the extent that they can, what not to click on if they do receive an email. But even physical security, like we've been talking about here with a laptop, I consider that physical security. That's a device that now gets accessed by a third party who shouldn't be touching it. So you need to be trained on the physical security, and even some stupid things like putting your passcode on a Post-it note underneath your keyboard.
Or on your monitor.
Or on your, even worse. I mean, imagine if, you're at home and I don't know, a utility guy comes in and is fixing something and sees the password there, and maybe he's errant, and all of that is possible. So cyber, to the point you were making, Mary, it's about digital, but it's also about the physical side of things, and you've got to protect that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think oftentimes the rules and the protocols are often given with the "because I said so," because it's the rules, and the why is missed. And I think great leadership and management skills. I think there's accountability. I think there's review, check-in. But I think it's also in just general leadership that you make yourself approachable, so that if that thing happens, that phishing email, people are not necessarily in fear, or they perhaps think of it lightly. Mm-hmm. That, I think of when I ride in on the train, the voice that says, if you see something, say something. Helping your employees know at every single level that anything that is suspicious, please tell me, and don't wait to tell me like tomorrow or Monday, mm-hmm. And encouraging people to understand that they are a piece of the puzzle. And if that piece of the puzzle is missing in communication, just exactly what Vince said about island hopping. All they need is one small entry point to be able to disperse throughout the entire organization. So, I think there's a lot of leadership and management communication skills, and also valuing your employees, because each one of them are important to the company, but they also could be a great threat. And then there's a whole host of things in the interest of time, about employees working from home.
Yeah. And Anna Maria, how much, if you don't do this, does that void a policy, or is there wording in a policy about training your people on this, or is it not?
No, I mean, you fill out an application and they want to know, what some of the protocols that you have in place. But again, they don't really penalize you if you don't have those in place. So,
it's not just insurance applications where having the training, having the protocol, the documented protocols in place are important. But when you're filling out an RFP for something consequential, you've got to answer those questions. And it reflects poorly on your business if you don't have things like training in place for your employees.
And I'll even go in advance of that. In hiring an individual, it might be wise to test some character and behavior and personality traits, and taking a deeper dive, and not just hiring somebody for their skills, and knowledge that they have. But one of your greatest things you can mitigate risk is not invite employees who take this stuff lightly and are perhaps have a tendency to not follow protocol. You can explore that a lot in interviewing and assessments before they ever get the key, to the door, the passcodes to get into the system.
And another thing too is, I don't think, and I'm sure Vince, you can attest to this, or even Mary, as far as the culture and what the theme is, I guess, in your company. I feel that if you get everybody involved and talk about it and scare them just a little bit, and show them, how you feel about this, and that it could devastate everybody, I think people will have a little bit more, I'm going to say, empathy, or even want to help. Because again, I don't think people think about it if you're not talking about it.
I'm going to leave it to Vince to scare him, and then I'll clean up the mess.
Yes.
How's that?
Let me give an example. I'm going to give a quick ransomware example this week that happened to a law firm. Massive law firm, many offices across the country, hit with ransomware. They ended up paying the ransom, and it was millions, and they got the encryption key to get at their data. And unfortunately, after they paid the ransom, the encryption key is spotty. It's not always working, and it's fading. They could have backed up. They could have done all the things that we've been talking about here. That's the type of stuff that I would use as examples with employees, and show, to Anna Maria, to your point, the consequences of not doing it.
Heavens.
Thank you, everyone. We're out of time for this show, but thanks to our panel and to viewers for joining us. Of course, you can follow up with anybody on this panel. If you have questions, following up with Vince with questions about cybersecurity and understanding what exactly you need to train your people to do and not do to keep yourself safe. Anna Maria can, of course, discuss cyber insurance. She can look through your policy. I encourage you to have her review your policy. She'll do it for free, but you'd be amazed at what is not covered in policies that people think are secure and safe. So have her review it and find out what's really in the fine print. Mary Elaine, of course, can talk about or train people towards, again, the protocols we've mentioned, and help you sort out personnel issues and even hiring, as she mentioned here at the end, the idea hiring. She does quite a bit of consulting and will even go set up the hiring process for you. So you can talk to her about that. And for me, video fits in here more, I think, as a training tool and a communication tool. You have certain standards and rules that you need people to follow. Video can be a great tool to make sure everybody's on the same page. Everybody's going to see and hear the same training video, same resource. So you're not having different departments trained differently and doing different things, which would be a disaster, and leave all those ports open that Vince talked about, all the ports that hackers can get in through that are just left in purely by ignorance, because as we go about our jobs, not really knowing the rules we should be following. So thank you all for joining us again. And please watch our other shows in this series. We have one on email spoofing, another one on ransomware. And please remember, the world of cybercrime and insecurity, it's a dangerous place. It's always there. It's not going away. Almost everyone is vulnerable. And yes, it really could happen to you.
You.
So thank you for joining us. Have a good day, everyone.